Let's not waste time. I have a confession. In middle school and the early part of high school, I was involved in the superhulk fandom. I am several years clean for this and have not taken over a social media post with gifs of Matt Smith since 2013. But for real, today I want to talk about the superhulk fandom because what the fuck was that? I think about this like constantly, just like, was that a real time in my life? Because online, I can't find evidence. I mean, if I dig hard enough, I can find evidence, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to pretend like it's really hard. I mean, it doesn't exist anymore. At least not to the level that was on Tumblr when I was a part of it. See, like I'm not involved with that anymore. I have moved past that. I'm a functioning adult for the most part. But I'm sure you understand where I'm coming from and what I'm saying. It's not as popular as it used to be. Lots of things go in and out of style, but with how big superhulk was and that entire phenomenon, I'm just shocked that it disappeared. It feels like it disappeared overnight. When 2 out of the 3 shows are still very, very much popular. I mean, Supernatural is coming to an end now, but Doctor Who is still going strong. Sherlock obviously had seasons come out, I think, through 2017, but I feel like after 2014, it just dropped off the face of the earth. Of course, for those of you who know what superhulk is, you clicked on this video for a reason, so we're gonna have to talk about it. For those of you who maybe don't know or weren't really involved with it, it was the trilogy of very popular shows back from like 2010 to 2014. And it was super ingrained in Tumblr culture. I should just put a cringe warning in here. Cringe warning. This is gonna make you uncomfortable because thinking about it makes me uncomfortable. But nobody's talking about it. So I want to. To break it down briefly, we'll just go over the 3 shows that were involved in this fandom. Supernatural, Doctor Who, and Sherlock. Supernatural was a show about 2 brothers who fought demons and angels, and there was a lot of queer baiting. Sherlock was a show set in 21st century London with Sherlock Holmes and John Watson who fought bad guys and crimes, and there was a lot of queer baiting. Doctor Who was a show set in the universe about a white man and his white friends, and despite having the opportunity to go literally anywhere in the galaxy, they still featured an exorbitant amount of white people. And I will be the first to admit I loved these fandoms. This is a terrible thing for me to confess, seeing as I want my career to progress somewhere. I want to be accepted in society. I don't want to admit this about myself. And my excuse that I will stand by is the fact that I was like an early teen. I had no brain cells. I don't think there's any inherent shame in liking these shows. They were popular for a reason. So before you get defensive or before you feel like I'm calling you out or being unfair, they were popular and I liked them and I stand by some of these shows, at least most seasons of those shows, still to this day. I mean, they had major glaring flaws and again, a lot of white people and a lot of queer baiting, but generally speaking, they were all right. I rewatched Sherlock actually with my fiance last year, and in my eyes, I think it still holds up as a great piece of entertainment. Supernatural.
Sammy! We need to talk about your feelings. Can't we just be 2 hot guys killing monsters?
Not so much. And I will not get started on Doctor Who because I sort of checked out after that 1 season finale, and I know that you know which one I'm talking about. Again, this is a confession. This is my confessional video. Instead of going to the Catholic priest and kneeling down in that little box, I am publishing this online for everyone to hear my shameful secrets. Again, I have to emphasize that alone, these shows were fine. The issue kind of arose when you shoved them all together and the people that came out of that. And that is where you get peak Tumblr cringe from like 2013, but not general cringe. It was only cringe for the people who are actually on Tumblr. Considering the text post takeovers, A lot more fandoms were included at any given point in time, but you could almost bet for certain that when something fandom related and super cringy happened on Tumblr, those three were at the center of it.
Why is it when something happens, it is always you three?
So now, if you're watching this video, you were probably either in the fandom and you are experiencing flashbacks already and suffering, or you definitely knew someone who was. Let me paint the picture. They probably dressed up as the Doctor for at least one Halloween. They had a sonic screwdriver. They were probably either condescending or overly nice and very loud. And they had a weird obsession with the occult, Christianity, gay people, and fanfiction.net. And later, AO3. Most of these people now probably fall somewhere on the queer spectrum. Not all of them, but I bet you a lot of them do. So that kind of brings me to my first question, which is, why did we flock to these shows? So the case for Supernatural. My case for Supernatural is that there was so much religion in the show that the queerbaiting that came mainly in the form of Dean and Castiel's non-existent relationship wasn't that far off from experiences that queer people whose families were involved in the church were already experiencing. For people involved in religion, and namely Christianity, because this is where I can speak from experience and I feel confident talking to the Christian experience, you really had to repress and hide your queerness. There was no safety in your life, so you didn't really have to stretch your imagination much to imagine living your truth in secret. Their pining for one another felt a lot like the closeted suppressed emotions that many young closeted queer kids felt. It made sense that they couldn't be actually gay out in public because in middle and high school, where school and home life is literally all you have, being actually gay in public wasn't an option. We also see this idea crop up in Destiel, Dean, and Castiel fanfiction, particularly stories that take place in the canon universe where people write the in-between scenes that we don't see on camera. The aftermath of a gruesome fight back in a shitty motel room, where Dean and Castiel are alone and might have gotten the opportunity to show their true emotions when no one was watching, even the audience, who they technically, in the canon of the universe, they didn't know that we're there and watching, but subtext, baby. And even in alternate universes where there aren't the ties of the canon universe, the characters of Dean and Castiel take on this internalized homophobia, and often their relationship is kept secret, only coming out when someone that they love, like Sam, Dean's brother, accidentally walks in on them like making out or something. They're trying to protect the people around them from their own queerness. This obviously doesn't cover the whole spectrum of all 700 seasons of Supernatural, but this is when the show was at its height in popularity, and people still believed that there was a chance for Dean and Castiel to get the opportunity to be out and gay in public, since in our culture at the time, it was becoming more common and gay marriage had just been legalized or was just about to be legalized at the time when Dean and Cass were introduced. And so there was a surge in expectation for queer representation in mainstream media. On top of the queerbaity, will they, won't they, there was also just so much space for young people to project emotional turmoil and family issues, since there was just enough interaction for us to see that the characters had a very obviously traumatic childhood, and people who maybe related to that or saw a glimpse of their own trauma in the represented family dynamics explored those circumstances through things like fan fiction and posting these well thought out, I can't believe it's not canon speculations on Tumblr. The case for Sherlock. I think that Sherlock had a lot of the same issues that Supernatural did, especially with the queerbait aspect. But I dove into that a lot while discussing Supernatural, so I'm going to try and expand on some other issues while discussing Sherlock. But just keep in mind, the queerbait idea really carries over. It's just a different couple or speculated couple in Sherlock, obviously, Sherlock and John. So again, I'll expand on some different ideas while discussing Sherlock, which out of the three is my favorite show, and I still recommend it to people to this day. Sherlock really brought this like bad boy vibe and like a hyperfixation on problem solving and emotional repression, and was, despite his bad rapport with his coworkers, and don't kill me for calling them that, but he was a cool guy. This show was really framed to create this not like other people narrative around Sherlock, and he's always one step ahead, looking back at the average. And I use air quotes because, like, obviously Sherlock Holmes as a literary character and throughout the Sherlock universe, he's a genius. He's a genius, period. I'm just playing into the vocabulary and the verbiage that is used in the narrative when discussing Sherlock. Anyway, he's literally looking back at average people and saying, like, why haven't you caught up yet? It feeds into the viewer's desire to be the main character and to be admired or envied by others. Now add into that the way that John Watson was able to break through Sherlock's like glassy, cold exterior and become his only real friend. It just continues to add to the elusiveness of exclusivity, which sounds so damn pretentious. But I think, you gotta choose the words that work, and unfortunately the words I use are just big brained. They're not like your average people words. I love when people can use just like big ass words, like just eloquent words in casual conversation and not make it sound pretentious. I do not have that. I like to speak at a very casual level. I think that we see that a lot with Gen Z and, millennials, is you don't have to show off your level of education or like how smart you are by using words that confuse people. The whole Albert Einstein thing, like, if you can't explain it to an 8-year-old, you haven't mastered the subject. I like putting that into use in my regular life because as an English major, I know a lot of big words. And this is my time to use them and not feel shamed for it. Yet still, I am here explaining myself. It's okay. It's just, I have some things to work on. Going back to the actual conversation at hand, mainly kind of main character syndrome and wanting to be included and feel wanted and needed. I feel like a huge part of the superwholock fan base was younger. I was a young teen, and I would estimate that it was probably like the 14 to 24 age range for everybody within the fandom. And I understand that that's a really wide net to cast, but I believe that John's relationship with Sherlock really highlighted that deep desire that young people have to feel accepted, different, and special during a part of your life when those feelings tend to be the most intense. Not to diminish those feelings in later years, but I would like to believe that in the next few years I might become a little bit more self-assured and not have this debilitating need to be seen as a unique and special individual. Okay, hopefully I haven't lost you guys because now we are going to look at part 3, the case for Doctor Who. And how does this tie in with the queerbaity main character syndrome narrative? With more main character syndrome, baby. Duh. A biologically impossible humanoid who shows up as an unusually handsome British man and travels the entire universe and picks one companion who's usually a really quirky and pretty girl? How could you miss all the warning signs there? Of course, again, I feel like I really touched on main character syndrome and that need to be chosen and accepted with Sherlock. So we are going to focus on the one aspect that Sherlock and Supernatural sort of, but don't really touch on, that pulls the trilogy of 2012 cringy Tumblr television together. Escapism. It is the tendency to seek distraction and relief from unpleasant realities, especially by seeking entertainment or engaging in fantasy. While watching TV in general is escapism in a lot of ways, the Doctor Who universe literally takes you off of planet Earth and into these other dimension worlds and planets that have their own different problems that are going to be inconsequential to your own life, no matter what. Like, who gives a shit if aliens take over that one planet? It's obviously like a plot point within the show, but it's nothing you will ever genuinely have to concern yourself with. I hope so, but it is 2020, so. Within the Doctor Who universe, literally anything has the potential to be canon. You have the opportunity to make any reality your reality. There's enough of a human connection element through the Doctor and his companions, and yes, sometimes those moments were really intense and heartbreaking, but the structure of the show developed a complete universe that you could escape to and run away from your problems in. This, paired with the iconic duos and eventual trio that came from the ninth, 10th, and 11th Doctors, is where superwholock was born. This cringe fest internet phenomenon would not have happened if it weren't for the perfect coincidental timing of all these shows airing pivotal episodes and plot lines when they did. Supernatural is just about to end. Editing Emily here. You're going to see me again in like 2 seconds because I just had another note that I wanted to add at a different point. But like I said earlier, I filmed this in October. So I know that Supernatural has since ended. November 19th has passed. We saw the I love you scene between Cass and Dean, to which Cass immediately dies and goes to hell. So I think every point that I made in this still stands, and that scene itself just plays into the barrier gaze trope that Supernatural has taken up basically since the very beginning, and since they started having queer characters. So I don't think that that changes anything that I've said here. I believe it was 15 seasons of that show, which is incredible. I'm so shocked that it went for as long as it did. But in season 4, where Castiel was introduced back in 2008, Castiel's introduction paved the way for several seasons of serious queerbait between him and Dean. Sherlock aired from 2010 all the way to 2017, but there were really large gaps in between the series, so I'd say that the show peaked around its most notable episode, the Reichenbach Fall, in which Sherlock dies, with a question mark. And the audience dies shortly after when realizing that they have to wait 2 years for the next episode. This caused me a lot of emotional damage personally. Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor, was a smash hit among the same crowd that adored Supernatural and Sherlock, but I do acknowledge that David Tennant, the 10th Doctor, was also really high up there in the running. I can't say for sure who would come out on top if we sent a poll to the people from that era of Tumblr, but I will confidently say that if it were down to a fist fight, David Tennant would win. On top of that, I believe that the popularity of these shows and the particular seasons that we just talked about really peaked during like the 2010 to 2014 time period, in part due to the legalization of gay marriage that took place in 2014. In the years leading up to it, I feel like there was a heightened morale among the LGBTQ community, and for an obvious reason. This was a massive moment, and these shows were either hinting at representation and inclusivity or offering an escape from the turbulence of a society where queer people still couldn't legally, exist. Hi, Editing Emily here. I realized by using the word exist, it negates the very real existence of queer people, obviously, before the legalization of gay marriage. And I just wanted to indicate that it wasn't my intention to erase that very real identity that people had. I just literally couldn't think of a better word. I know that you guys aren't going to get into semantics. I know that you understand. I just feel the need to address that because I didn't like that I chose to use that word, and this was the way that I could fix it. So yeah, enjoy the rest of the video. Why did the fandom fall apart? Of course, all good things come to an end, and the superwholock fandom is no exception. There seemed, though, to be a very abrupt departing of fans from across the spectrum. Personally, by the end of 2014, I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to the fandoms, and I think by 2015, I was completely into a new phase of my life. After that, I wasn't constantly keeping up with the community, but I was still on Tumblr on occasion, and it seemed like I wasn't the only one logging off. The trilogy of the superwholock fandom was coming to its close. Doctor Who said said goodbye to Matt Smith at the end of 2013 and drew to a close 2 major trios that the show had featured since its reprise. The 9th, 10th, and 11th Doctors were kind of wrapped up, and then Rory, Amy, and the 11th Doctor were as well. In my head, I still see that collection with like a bow on top, like a whole package deal, since these were the first Doctors since the show's reboot, and Matt Smith's time on the show had left really, really large shoes to fill. I think a lot of people stopped watching after he left. Not to mention, his relationship with Rory and Amy was just heart-shattering when it came to a close. Sherlock came back from the dead in 2014, but by that time, John was getting married, and there was a lot of controversy regarding Mary's character and how she was disrupting this unspoken relationship between John Watson and Sherlock Holmes. This was a huge dividing factor with a lot of fans, and I think that those who fought until the bitter end didn't end up getting what they wanted anyway, so it just looked really, really bad. Once people realized they weren't going to get the relationship that they wanted, I think a lot of people knocked Sherlock down on their list of importance within the fandom and just in general, and continued to bank on Supernatural to give them what they wanted, representation. Which is not, it sounds like just crazy people asking for crazy things, but it's not a crazy thing to ask for, especially given the subtext that was interwoven throughout Sherlock. Now, Supernatural, again, it's coming to a close, and I haven't really kept up with it for several years, kind of since I exited the fandom. But I believe that this show held the most viewers from the superwholock fandom due to its consistency, predictability, and the continued hope that Dean and Castiel would finally become canon. And not just subtext canon, although that kept the hope and anticipation alive for many seasons. I believe that the height of the Supernatural craze died out with the superwholock fandom, but at some point down the road, even the most dedicated viewers who had maybe been hoping for the representation that they wanted kind of realized that they were being strung along. I have very low expectations for news regarding the final season, but who knows? And according to a single article that I read online, the last episode of season 15 again is coming out in a few weeks, so you never know what might happen in those last moments. Supernatural definitely had the most opportunity to be inclusive and have solid representation, but of course, sometimes you just don't get what you want. I suppose I should probably come up with a conclusion. I sort of spit out like a thesis statement, thesis question, conversation starter in the beginning, but to be honest, I just wanted to discuss the internet phenomenon that was superwholock for quite some time, so I figured why not sit down, write some notes and just chat about it. And also, for the sake of wanting to end this on like a very poignant note or maybe a joke or something, I'll tell you right now before we get to the very end, like and subscribe and leave a comment that says superwholock or like super who the fuck even cares. So to continue, I'm going to think of my conclusion statement just so I don't leave you guys hanging. Superwholock was a fandom of young, fierce individuals who were super fucking cringy and really annoying in the moment. I'm not going to try and justify the Tumblr takeover posts, but if you can look past the other stuff, you can see that they were just really passionate individuals who were invested into the stories that they loved. Stories that really had the opportunity to be inclusive and showcase queer romance on popular television. I think that the people who broke away from superwholock when it was time and didn't try to hold on to things of the past learned how to be super vocal about their support for the LGBTQ community. They made lasting friendships with people that they never would have met otherwise, and hopefully benefited from that phase in their life despite the major letdowns that they experienced. I'm never going to bash someone for going through like a cringy phase because my head would be the first on the chopping block. But I will say I never added a fandom onto one of those posts, so if you did, that's on you. And to the rest of you who were there in the depths of Tumblr with me, I hope you know that you are not alone and that I too constantly regret most of my decisions during those years. But I think all in all, we turned out all right. if not just a little bit mentally ill. That's it. I was going to end, on the mentally ill thing, but that felt in poor taste. So I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for sitting down and watching this video. I'll have a new one up whenever. And for now, keep doing the damn thing. See ya.